Thank you. I love this open mic. So I'm from a little company called RBC. Who's heard of it? We have 18 open roles on my team, so if you guys are looking to join a fascinating company that's really kind of leading the charge, we do have open roles, especially in digital marketing, so definitely would love to chat with you. It's a great topic. It's about, I was told, talk about partnerships. You got 5 minutes, so someone will probably ring the bell when I'm kind of going over. Talk about partnerships, talk about collaboration, collisions. We do a ton of partnerships. I'm going to talk about one story today. I guess I should get to the first slide here. There we go. So what I thought I'd do is I'd talk about my golf game. So I'm going to tell you a story about our long game and our short game. We have a pretty good short game. I'll explain what that means. But we really figured about how could we add a better long game into our marketing portfolio. So I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. But the story I want to talk about is our journey on content marketing and how we've kind of changed our marketing kind of approach over the last couple of years. And a lot of those partnerships have played a role in that, whether it's content producers, whether it's technology, whether it's measurement vendors. So I want to touch a little bit on that. So I'm sure all of you can kind of connect with this reality, which is if you look at the stats, the average person sees 360 advertisements a day. They're exposed to over 5,000 different brands. So talk about clutter, that's a lot of clutter. And I particularly like the one in the bottom here where the guy's riding his bike looking at his cell phone. The other thing is our culture as Canadians now is we're kind of addicted to our phones. I'm sure if I look at you guys, I can tell how well I'm doing, how quickly you look down at your phone and check out kind of what's happening in the social feed. So there's a lot of clutter, and from banking and financial services, one of our biggest challenges is how do you break through that clutter? And we're also a low involvement category. People don't wake up in the morning and think about banking. There's a lot more exciting things to talk about. So how do we kind of break through that clutter and kind of get noticed and add value? The other thing I want to talk about, as we talked about this long game and the short game, is a bit of a marketer's dilemma. Who folks in the room here were marketers? How many of you feel the pressure of the short game always? What results did you deliver last week? How are you spending your money? And you feel like you're continually justifying. Caroline, that's not true. You should put your hand up. So if you think about the short game, it's really around those short-term tactics. A lot of programmatic tools are in that space. It's around how do you drive short-term sales. They're easy to measure. You can look at CPAs, you can look at clicks. But the reality is the short game doesn't really have a lot of impact on the brand. And there's a lot of organizational gravitational pull, especially probably from your CEO or CFO and CEO to kind of say, how am I getting a return on my investment? The reality, if you look at a lot of the studies over the last 30 years, the long game is much better. So brand building, emotional connections, all the research show it's twice as efficient, twice as effective. It'll drive a lot more profit over the long term. But the reality is it's really hard to measure. And the second part, it takes time. And most companies don't have a lot of patience. So I want to talk a little bit about how we've been kind of balancing the short game and the long game, and try to move our organization to a kind of whole new marketing approach. So if you look at the short game, we have a very successful short game. We insourced a lot of our programmatic tools and search tools. We have an in-house team that has been doing an amazing job. And if you look at the reference to the funnel, top of funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, a lot of our activities today, we're at the bottom of the funnel, and they're driving CPAs that continually go down, and we've been extremely pleased with our results through digital, through many of the platforms, Facebook, Google, etc. If we look back in 2013, which is a few years ago, about 85% of our spend was going towards the short game. And if you look most recently, we looked at all our content that we were creating, most of it was at the bottom of the funnel. And I like to use this analogy of dating. A lot of companies are very good of trying to sell you something. Hi, nice to meet you, Rory. What's your name? Would you like to get married? No? Who's your friend? So a lot of our programmatic tools and stuff are all about trying to sell something. And yes, for those 1% to 2% of people that are in the moment that want to buy, it works extremely well. And with a huge internet and lots of impressions, we can use programmatic tools to kind of find those 1% to 2% very efficiently. The reality is there's 98% of our prospects and clients who aren't quite ready to buy. So you kind of do a little bit of dating. So Rory, maybe we could, maybe have a coffee, maybe chat a bit, maybe go for lunch. If that goes well, maybe go on a first date. The reality is if we did a little bit of a self-reflection on our marketing budget, and we realized most of the stuff was all going to the bottom. And that's good in the short term, and we get great results. But the reality is we have to start building it at the top of the funnel We have to drive our brand, we have to drive consideration. And when we did an audit of our content marketing, we were doing lots of content, but most of it was down at the bottom. So Caroline Paxton, who's in the room, led this, so I'm going to speak on her behalf. And if you have any tough questions, she's here to answer them. But what we did, and a few of our vendors actually that helped us are here as well, is we said, okay, how do we start engaging people at the top of the funnel? So using content marketing. So we realized that let's not talk about product, let's just engage people in topics. So we created a whole new site called Discover and Learn. It's a hub, but the reality is we're trying to put it in people's paths. So it's in the feed at Facebook and other pieces. But we also try to think about different types of content. So you'll notice none of the product, there's no product selling in any of this content. We tried video, we've tried a number of video series. So there's one called Kidsplanation, which was kind of inspired by The Big Short. Anybody remember that movie? Well, we actually got little kids taking the most complex financial terms that most people are intimidated about, and we have little kids talking about it. It did extremely well. We're getting 8 times the response rate on that type of video than we would typically get through the different platforms. We've done a series around Entrepreneurs in the Garage, which is around taking people that have done startups. Many people in this room could be perfect for Entrepreneurs in the Garage. It's about tell your story and inspire people about starting a business. An interesting one that we're just launching now down in the Cash Confidentials area is around savings. Most people have a hard time finding a few dollars at the end of the month to put away. It's very easy to spend, but it's hard to save. So we actually interviewed a whole bunch of people, and just fantastic stories about what they do to try to save money. And I wish we could have showed some videos tonight, but check it out if you can. So the biggest challenge with content marketing is how do you get a flow of quality content, how do you build it? And it can be quite expensive. So we think about disruption in the agency model. We couldn't afford to use the traditional agency model to start building content. So we came across a vendor who actually has a workflow management process, had access to 60,000 freelance video producers and article writers, and we're now producing stuff. We can get an article written now for about $700 on average. In the traditional model, it'd be $5,000, $6,000 to even open a docket. So we're getting a high quality flow of content. The interesting part as we look at partnerships, so to kind of go to the topic, you can't achieve these things on your own. If we tried to do all this in-house, it would fail. We know we're not experts at that, but if you look at partnerships, we've had a number of key partnerships. We have the traditional media distribution companies, for example. We've done some work with Globe and Mail, we've done some stuff with Facebook, etc. So the traditional stuff, but we're also doing stuff with BuzzFeed and other things, and we're pretty agnostic of who we work with. It's more about who can try to engage our clients differently. We've had to test a new video production model. We can't afford to use traditional models to create content. The old days of creating a video for $50,000, $60,000 is just not scalable. We're now creating kind of little tidbits of videos that are high quality that are, $5,000 to $10,000 on average. We have technology partners. I mentioned a couple. One company called Contently, which they do a workflow management, which you engage writers. They also have the ability to measure all your articles, measure all your videos. And the other thing is the access to all these freelancers. We also want to touch a little bit on some of the beyond banking. So here's an example of content not just being engaging clients at the top of the funnel, but it's also about how do we build it into our kind of our product offering. So some of the work we're doing in banking, especially on the business side, is we're now doing partnerships. Here's a sample of a few of the ones we've done. Not only do you take a banking account, but we're doing partnerships. If you want to grow your business, we have a partnership with Promote. We have another partnership with Shopify. If you want to manage your accounts, your payroll process, ADP, Moneris around facilitating all your debit and credit transactions. And we just recently, last week, talked about a partnership with Wave. So just thinking about content. So as we talk about partnerships, we're doing lots of different types of partnerships. I think the interesting part, just to kind of come back to kind of some key learnings, what we found is the top of the funnel content actually is significantly outperforming traditional kind of bottom of the funnel content. So we're getting about 4 times the average in our efforts. We're seeing a significant higher kind of average engagement time in that content. cost savings, working with different vendors, and I'm sure there's lots of folks in this room that we may or may not work with that could add into this, which is how do you get stuff out quicker at a lower cost and more effective, and just get that consistency of flow. So we've exceeded our expectations with where we are today, but it is a journey. We're just kind of starting down that path. The other thing they asked me to talk a little bit about is just some of the key learnings around partnerships. I think the biggest key learning we have is we actually do tons of partnerships. This is just one example. The way we look at partnerships are, one, is the idea got lots of potential and scale? So if we're going to spend time and energy behind it, does it have lots of potential? And if it does, then how do we start small? So how do we become much more agile to get a small little test off the ground, see how it goes? If it goes well, then obviously we're going to spend a lot more money on it and double down moving forward. The other thing we've realized as a big bank is our culture is not the easiest to deal with. So we have a very large legal department, we have a very large compliance department, we have a very large group of folks that are going to tell us, what we have to be worried about. We are in the business of managing risk as a business. So we've had to change our culture. We've said, okay, if you got a small little company that wants to partner with us, we can't bring our army of 1,000 lawyers and compliance officers for a little test. So we're pushing ourselves to say, how do we get off the ground quicker? How do we try something? We want to we use the analogy of driving a car. We're okay driving the car off the road a little bit, as long as we're not going to drive it into the ditch. So how do we as a culture start changing? So I would just kind of say, there's lots of examples of partnerships that have gone well. These are a couple of good examples. We've had lots of failures. And I think our culture is about trying things. If they go well, keep pushing it. If they don't go well, shut it down quickly and move on. Don't be afraid to fail. And we're also, from a culture perspective, trying to bring a lot of folks in, from folks from this room, in terms of trying to change our culture as a marketing team, so that we do push ourselves, become much more entrepreneurial. So I think I'm probably at the end of my time. But I would just say it's a journey, and I wish you all luck, and I'm happy to take a few questions if anybody has them.
Hi, I'm Jessica from Ace Bakery and Insights. I just wanted to know, you talked a bit about brand equity and how you track it. Was wondering what kind of studies you do, because that's something that I work with on the research side, really understanding our consumer and understanding their perception of the brand and how we can improve it.
It's a great question. Hopefully you can hear it. The brand equity, the biggest challenge we have in measurement at the top of the funnel is getting good metrics. And I think we have good metrics from a survey perspective, so we can go in and kind of take a target audience and look at them and kind of see what was kind of their previous state on consideration, brand love, all the kinds of great things. And then kind of do a measurement later and see, are we moving the needle, which is kind of fairly traditional. But we're very open to folks that have kind of new methodologies at the top of the funnel, because the reality is, in digital marketing, we just have so many good metrics that we optimize on almost like on a real-time basis on the short end. But we don't have good metrics to optimize at the top of it. So how do you start bringing some of those programmatic tools and new learnings that work at the bottom up to the top of the funnel?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that we've got it solved, but most of it today is pretty well survey-based. And of course, technology providers are making that easier, but I wouldn't say it's the greatest for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Yeah, the sign.
I'm Jeff. Thank you for your presentation. It's great. Just a quick question on mobile payment. In some developing countries like China, where you have just a massive high adoption rate of mobile payment, where you have they have WeChat Pay, where you can just go to any restaurant or even street food vendors and pay with your phone. Why is that in obviously our country or the U.S. mobile payment has not really accelerated at this pace of compared to some of the developing countries? Just curious.
I think the WeChat Pay is pretty amazing. I think we all aspire to get there. I think the reality is trying to move our payments capabilities in Canada to be closer to in-stream when the person is kind of in the environment, as opposed to making folks leave to go to a different environment to actually pay, etc. I would say in the next few years you'll see us much closer to where kind of some of the leading markets like China are. But there's a whole ecosystem within Canada, and for myself, I'm not an expert in this space. I know there's folks at RBC that are much better to speak to this, but there's a whole ecosystem that has to get there. So it's just not RBC can kind of make it happen. I think we got to bring partners with us.
Hi there, I'm Annette from Chime Digital, and I'm just wondering, you talked about content marketing and doing things that are unique with different partners. Have you ever considered doing documentaries? There's a real trend. You look at the success of Harley Davidson, their recent documentaries now on the on the Discovery Channel.
We actually have done some longer format content. And I think we're not too bad at longer format content. I think our biggest issue, if I had to kind of hold a mirror up and reflect, is how do we get to short format content? You know, the average consumer today is going to give you about 5-6 seconds to grab their attention, and how do you engage them in that short period? I'm probably more, I don't think we're great at it, but I think I'm more comfortable that we're better at longer format content, but as an organization, short format is definitely something that we have to get better at. So if you can use, if you can use kind of more short format techniques to then engage them to then watch the longer pieces.
Like a teaser.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, so we got the last question.
Hi there. My name is Steph, and I work at Hootsuite. So this was a really insightful presentation for me because we work with a lot of big banks like RBC and companies that specialize in the FinServ space. So it was great to hear your perspective on kind of the challenges that you have measuring success of the short game and how that compares to the long game. And especially your passion for partnering and how you are able to kind of drive success from that. And if there's one thing that we're passionate about at Hootsuite, it is partnership and digital strategy. So if you are ever looking for a partner in your digital transformation, then I think I could hook you up, and we'd certainly be interested in a conversation about your business objectives. So that's Stephanie, and I work at Hootsuite representing the team here. Thanks again.
Collaboration, yay, that's great. Well, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, Alan. Thank you.